It's up!
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. Lots of news today, obviously, and equally obvious is that a lot of it is about Israel. But that's not the only news that we have. We've got a lot of different news, and as you know, we also do some lighter stories near the end of the show, second hour of the show, and I think those are fantastic. So make sure you get all the different kinds of news from us. Stick around the whole 2 hours, and then we'll do something afterwards too. All right, Casper.
Also, we will be having an hour-long bonus episode. Cenk will be interviewed as a presidential candidate by David Schuster. That will be open and public to everybody. So if you are a member, obviously you're going to be able to access it. If you're not a member, you're going to be able to access it. So stick around after the main show to watch that.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. No, TYT said that's a half an hour after the show.
Oh, my bad.
So like it's right after the show. I will come on as a guest. David Schuster will interview me. That'll be half an hour. And then right after that, I'm going on Chris Cuomo's show on News Nation. So the interview tonight right here on the Young Turks, freely available to everybody, is about an update on my campaign. That's really important in New Hampshire, but we're not talking about it here in the show. We're going to talk about it as a guest. But Chris Cuomo's appearance on News Nation, that's about Israel, and I'll be debating Alan Dershowitz. So that should be really interesting. Both are very interesting. Check it out if you can. All right, sorry, Anna, go ahead.
All right, well, we begin with the latest in Gaza, and just want to warn you all, obviously this is a difficult story to see images of, difficult story to even talk about considering the civilian deaths in the Gaza Strip. But with that warning, let's get to it.
The wrath of Israel is concentrated on Gaza City and elsewhere in the north. This is what was happening while the Strip was under a mobile and internet blackout. No means to call an ambulance, so they use whatever vehicle they can find, knowing the next missile or airstrike won't be far off. The Palestinian Red Crescent sent video of people sheltering in Al-Quds hospital in Gaza City, which they say the Israeli Defense Forces have told them to evacuate.
Last week, Israel launched its ground invasion into Gaza. Now, it's not a full ground invasion yet, but that is what is planned for the near future. And as the Washington Post has reported, their early movement and near-term objectives remain shrouded in secrecy. Now, of course, the general statement you'll hear from Israeli lawmakers, from the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is that they want to root out Hamas. Sometimes they slip and they share a little more of what they plan to do, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But as a result of this, the families of the hostages that are currently held captive by Hamas in Gaza are worried that the Israeli government isn't really concerned about the well-being of their loved ones, and they do have cause for concern as footage from inside Gaza shows the danger that the hostages are in, yes, by Hamas, but also by the endless airstrikes and now the ground invasion into the region. Let's watch.
An Israeli soldier took a video showing his platoon raising the Israeli flag, as he put it, in the heart of Gaza. The IDF sent in more forces overnight, releasing footage of tanks and, for the first time, foot soldiers, reportedly inside an open area in northern Gaza. Last night, the Prime Minister said the war against Hamas would be long and difficult. They showed armoured bulldozers operating on the Gaza side of the Erez crossing, where they say they found Hamas fighters trying to exit a tunnel. Hamas, for its part, released a video which appears to show a wire-guided missile strike on an Israeli armoured vehicle, one in a column that had entered Gaza, a sign that this battle will not be cost-free for either side. Early this morning, an Israeli airstrike hit the Bilal bin Rabah Mosque in central Gaza. How much more before Israel decides that's enough?
The death toll in Gaza is roughly 8,000 people. It was confirmed this morning that of those 8,000 reported deaths, about 13 of the individuals were Hamas militants. So go ahead and do the math. Nonetheless, on Friday night, internet and cellular service were cut, plunging Gaza into digital darkness. Spotty service returned on Sunday. That was after the Biden administration apparently pressured Netanyahu to basically turn on the telecommunications services and the internet services there. Netanyahu, in a televised statement Saturday night, described the escalation as the second phase of the war. Now, the Israeli Defense Forces on Sunday over the weekend released this short black and white video. You saw a little bit of that in the last clip we showed you. And as the Washington Post also reports, these are not the targeted raids the IDF carried out last week, which it said were executed by small elite units that crossed back into Israel at the end of their mission. This is the beginning of what Israeli leaders are warning could be a very long war, which would see Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, destroyed and a new entity installed to govern the enclave. Now, IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari referred to the three-phase plan outlined by the IDF Minister Yoav Gallant on October 20th. So it includes first airstrikes, as we all saw, airstrikes that continue to happen on the Gaza Strip even as Israeli soldiers enter for a ground invasion. That will be followed by lower intensity operations with the objective of eliminating pockets of resistance. And finally, the removal of Israel's responsibility for life in the Gaza Strip and the establishment of a new security reality for the citizens of Israel, according to the statement that was issued by his office. So all of this is really concerning for the Israeli families who are wondering how the hostages are doing, who are wondering whether the hostages are still alive. Now, Hamas put out a statement saying that there were 50 Israeli hostages who have already died as a result of the Israeli airstrikes. Look, I would take that statement with a grain of salt. We have no confirmation of that. However, I think it would be foolish to think that all of the hostages are okay, considering the bombardment that the IDF has engaged in and continues to engage in. And there is no ceasefire in sight. We'll get to the ceasefire in just a moment. Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to knock down a bunch of absurd talking points from the right-wing government of Israel. But first on the Hamas statement. Of course, we don't trust Hamas that the bombings have killed 50 hostages. I would put a boulder of salt on that. First of all, we don't know the number is 50. Second of all, we don't know how many of them Hamas killed, as opposed to the bombings, however many there were. But as we are incredibly skeptical about what Hamas puts out, we're also incredibly skeptical about what Israel puts out. And so along those lines, first of all, let me just knock down the most common talking point maybe of my life, which is if you'd like to kill Palestinians, you just say to the, Hamas is using them as human shields. So that's why we killed them. Just think about that for a second, right? Everybody does the first half of the sentence. Hamas is using human shields. But they never do complete the second half of the sentence. So we killed them. Not just Hamas, but the human shields. So even if that statement were true, I'm asking you, would you kill the human shields? And now Israel's right-wing government is doing something even more absurd. They're killing their own human shields. So like, not only are they killing Palestinians indiscriminately, and don't please with the, oh, well, no, we told the residential building seconds before we killed everyone inside that we were gonna bomb it, and then we destroyed half the city. Telling me that that's not indiscriminate is absurd on its face, right? But now, the Hamas has the Israeli hostages and American hostages and hostages from all over the world. And Israel, I mean, you could say, hey, you know what? What's fair is that apparently they don't care about human shields no matter where they're from, right? Even if they believe that talking point. So why are you, okay, which leads to the next point about the hostages, which is that they're almost certainly in the tunnels. And most of the press acknowledges that they're almost certainly in the tunnels. And now Israel is saying that they're not even going to go into the tunnels. And I get why. There could be booby trapped, almost certainly are. That gives Hamas an advantage in dark tunnels that they're familiar with and Israeli defensive forces aren't. I totally get it. At the same time, if all you do is blow up the tunnels and the hostages are in the tunnels, you're saying I don't give a damn about the hostages' lives. And look, and you could say, hey, it's Hamas's fault for taking the hostages in the first place. And that's absolutely true, right? But still, you're doing an act right now that could lead to their death. And there's also responsibility for that as well, right? So, and then guys, this whole idea of, well, if Hamas would just go out into the middle of a field and put up their military base, well, then we could bomb that and then kill everyone inside, and then they wouldn't have human shields. Wakey, it's a tiny little place, Gaza, right? There is no military bases because there is no government. And if there was a military base, Israel would kill everyone inside instantly, well before this, right? As soon as they see Hamas, they kill Hamas. So, yeah, they live in an open air prison along with 2.2 million other prisoners. And last thing here for a sec here, and then I'll get back to more details, which is that when they say they're going to kill everyone in Hamas and they're going to eradicate Hamas and they're going to destroy Hamas, as Anna just alluded to in Netanyahu's statements, and you'll see a lot more of that. How do you accomplish that mission? And how do we know when it's done? This is like when America said, we're going to liberate Iraq.
Right.
How do we know when they're liberated, right? And we never found out. And it just lasted forever and ever. And Afghanistan lasted 20 years. And now Netanyahu is saying, until we eradicate Hamas. Does Hamas come out and say we are eradicated? Do random other Palestinians come out and say that they're eradicated? Who determines that they're eradicated? In other words, it's a war with no end. And Netanyahu knows he's got a reckoning, a political reckoning coming to him with Israeli citizens as soon as the war is over. So he's never going to end the war. So he has put an impossible standard that can never be met so that the war is perpetual.
Last week, Hamas had offered to release a larger amount of hostages at once, up to 60 of the hostages. But the argument was, you gotta stop with the airstrike so we can actually carry this out safely. But also, we want you to release Palestinian prisoners within Israel. And of course, the Israeli government refused to do that. Now, the hostage exchange, hostage prisoner exchanges from the past were pretty lopsided, where Israel was willing to give up a ton of prisoners, up to 1,000, I believe, in return for one IDF soldier. And then it turned out that some of the prisoners that they released planned the attacks that were carried out in Israel. So I understand a little of the ideology or the mentality that the Israeli government might have in regard to refusing to maybe, in their minds, make the same mistake again. But that, along with other actions that have been taken by the Israeli government in response to Hamas, make it appear to me, at least, this is my opinion, they're not really all that concerned with the hostages. And the hostages are very likely in those underground tunnels. And what the IDF is saying is, well, we don't want to go into the tunnels. That's a huge risk on our lives. So we have found creative means in destroying the tunnels. Okay, but if the hostages are in the tunnels, the hostages gone, they'll be dead. So as long as we're all acknowledging what the strategy is here, and if people are okay with that, all right, I certainly would not be if I were a family member of one of the hostages. And the hostages have been speaking out, so I want to give them a voice here. Not the hostages, the family members of the hostages have spoken out. So in a protest outside Israel's defense headquarters in Tel Aviv, dozens gathered carrying pictures of the captives chanting, "Return them now." Again, Hamas offered that deal on Saturday. Hamas on Saturday, according to AP News, offered Israel in exchange the release of all hostages in Gaza for all Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. The plight of the prisoners is deeply emotional for Palestinians who widely see the prisoners as freedom fighters. Now, Israel has a long history of agreeing to these lopsided exchanges. So it was in 2021 when they released 1,000 prisoners in exchange for Gilad Shalit, who was an IDF soldier kidnapped and dragged across the border to Gaza. Now, the family members are speaking out, family members of the hostages, including Mirav Leshem Gonen, whose daughter, Romi, was believed to have been kidnapped by Gaza and taken into the Gaza Strip. She says this in regard to how Netanyahu is handling the hostage situation. "We are scared, we are worried, where are they? What's happening with them? Who is taking care of them? We heard yesterday about the tanks going in and we are all concerned." And she says that the families believe that the swap deal would actually be incredibly popular and would get a lot of support among the Israeli people. That's her opinion. I haven't seen any polling on that, so I can't confirm it. But she also says they feel like they're left behind and no one is really caring about the hostages, said Miki Hamovitz, a former lawmaker who spoke on behalf of the hostages' families at Saturday's protest. No one is explaining what's going on. Now, with that said, I do want to go to the reaction from Netanyahu, who's being pressured increasingly to engage in a ceasefire. He's not interested in a ceasefire. So let's hear what he has to say about that before we also talk a little bit about his fundamentalism and what's motivating his actions here. Let's watch.
Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen.
And I want to be clear, while Netanyahu does not want to engage in a ceasefire, the United States, for the most part, is not part of the international community urging Israel to engage in a ceasefire. They want to pause for humanitarian aid to come in, but that's it.
No, yeah, there's been no calls for a ceasefire from America at all. And so even Bernie Sanders, who has acknowledged that Palestinians are human, which is as far as anyone in Washington will go, and said it does not, Israel's need to defend itself does not excuse killing innocent civilians, and we appreciate Bernie for saying that, but he has still not called for a ceasefire.
Correct.
Even though hundreds of his former staffers and supporters have asked him to call for a ceasefire. So in America, the barbarism continues. Now, some people say, well, oh yeah, speaking of barbarism, would you have done a ceasefire after 9/11? Well, let me ask you guys, how did our reaction to 9/11 work out for us and for the whole world? It worked out disastrously. Not only did we go to war in Afghanistan and stay there for 20 years, but we also randomly invaded a Middle Eastern country that didn't even attack us on Iraq. So, and killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians, lost thousands of our own service members, spent trillions of dollars. So if that's your model for how Israel should respond, you should check your sanity, because that was the absolutely disastrous response to 9/11. If we had done a diplomatic route, a different route, a more specialized route. For example, I keep saying special forces. We actually had Osama bin Laden cornered by special forces in Tora Bora, and Rumsfeld refused to go in. That's according to the New York Times, that had excellent intelligence on it. So we did the exact wrong thing after 9/11, and now people are using that as an excuse for Israel to do the exact wrong thing, having learned nothing from our experience. And we created a situation there that was so volatile that it endangered the whole world. And now Israel is doing likewise. So what Hamas did was brutal and awful, but in the overreaction, Israel is endangering not just innocent Palestinian lives, but Israel itself.
Yes, exactly.
Because now the rage is boiling over the whole world. And so Netanyahu has set Israel on a disaster course. And we've got to move him off that course as a friend and an ally of Israel, Not because we dislike Israel, but because we want the right thing for both Israel and the Palestinians.
Exactly. Not only is the indiscriminate bombing and killing of Palestinian civilians immoral and flies in the face of international law, but it also, in the long term, is not at all strategic in keeping the Israeli population safe. Because consider what is currently happening in the Arab world, the protests and the fury that's currently happening. At first, Erdogan in Turkey, the leader of Turkey, apparently was supportive of Israel.
Yeah, he came out with a very pro-Israel statement, and actually, there's a lot of sense to it. Turks and Arabs are different, ethnically different. And so because of a lot of Arab immigrants, and this is a lot of irony here, right, and interesting points here, but because of a lot of Syrian and Afghan immigrants into Turkey, there's kind of an anti-Arab sentiment in Turkey now. It's a shame that exists, but it does. And so there was a lot of support for Israel in the beginning, and Turkey and Israel are longtime allies historically, right? But then when the Turkish population started seeing the bombing of Gaza, and they are seeing it far more graphically than we are, because American media censors that, but Turkish media is not censoring it. So they're seeing body parts on television 24/7. So the rage began to build in the population until Erdogan, who almost never flipped his position and said, not only are we not on Israel's side anymore, but we think Hamas are freedom fighters.
On top of that, he is considering expelling Israeli diplomats from the country. So there's that. And look, it's not just Turkey, okay? The United States is aiding and abetting what's currently happening. So as a result of the rage that militants are feeling and acting on in other countries like Syria, the United States is now doing airstrikes in Syria, okay? Israel is considering a preemptive war against Lebanon. This is unraveling and quickly snowballing into a potential world war. And the idea, the notion that this is somehow going to keep Israeli civilians safe is ridiculous and laughable and dangerous. So if you care about Israeli civilians, as we do, and I think we've proven it with how aggressively we have condemned Hamas and what they did to innocent Israeli civilians on October 7th, you should be concerned with the disproportionate reaction and response by the Israeli government and the IDF that has now killed thousands of civilians. 98%? I mean, do you do the math, Cenk?
Yeah.
I mean, roughly 8,000 civilians dead, or 8,000 people dead, only 13 confirmed Hamas militants.
Yeah, and one last thought, guys, for now. Although we have the Netanyahu video, we got to show you.
We're gonna do that after the break because I want to do that as a standalone. It's really important to get to that.
Yeah, but guys, one of our members, Ray's, wrote in with a really great point. Wait, what happens if Trump is elected and the right wing is in a very isolationist mood? And let's say that Netanyahu is successful in something he's been trying to do for over a decade and uses this as an excuse to start a war with Iran. But then Trump and the Republicans withdraw and go, no, we don't want to get involved in foreign wars. Good luck, Israel. Now you set the Middle East on fire. We helped you to set it on fire. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. And now you're in a war with them and they have the ability to send in drones, missiles, you name it, right? That is a disaster scenario that for the first time in my life risks an existential threat to Israel. And Netanyahu is walking Israel right into it. So if you love Israel and you think Israel's an important ally of America, do not let him walk Israel into that trap, because that for the first time endangers the actual existence of Israel. But that's if you make the war broader. Do not make it broader. There is no conceivable end to that strategy that winds up better for Israel, let alone the Palestinians and the rest of the Middle East.
When we come back from the break, we're gonna talk a little bit about recent statements by Prime Minister Netanyahu and how his belief in fundamentalist religion might be one of the motivating factors behind how he is responding to the attacks by Hamas on October 7th. So stick around, we'll be back with that story and more. Don't miss it.
TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Ryan Wolfe with you guys. Ryan just signed up. We appreciate it. He hit the join button below. You can do likewise if you're on YouTube. Everybody else, tyt.com/join. Your membership makes all the difference. I can't emphasize that enough. Thank you to all of our members. Anna.
Well, I wanted to get to a video that's making its rounds online featuring Netanyahu and a pretty terrifying statement he made in regard to the Israeli government and the IDF's actions in Gaza. So let's get to it. Let me tell you more about it. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a concerning speech, to say the least, that shed some light on what the motivating factors might be in regard to his actions in the Gaza Strip. Now, the overwhelming majority of individuals killed in the Gaza Strip by the IDF happen to be Palestinian civilians, many of whom are women and children. They are being told to evacuate half of the Strip, fleeing the north to go to the south, and then the south is bombed. They are engaging in a limited ground invasion at the moment, but are expected to increase the number of Israeli troops there. And as they do that, the airstrikes continue. And when you see the lack of concern for the loss of human life, civilian life in the Gaza Strip, one wonders what goes through the mind of a prime minister like Netanyahu. Well, you're about to hear it. Let's watch.
You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible. And we do remember, and we are fighting our brave troops and combatants who are now in Gaza or around Gaza and in all other regions in Israel are joining this chain of Jewish heroes, a chain that has started 3,000 years ago from Joshua ben Nun until the heroes of 1948, the Six-Day War, the 73 October War, and all other wars in this country. Our hero troops, they have one supreme main goal: to completely defeat the murderous enemy and to guarantee our existence in this country. We've always said, never again. Never again is now.
So that video is making its rounds online because of the religious fundamentalist rhetoric used to justify the absolute terror and brutality that Palestinian civilians are dealing with right now as a result of the military actions by the Israeli government. There's a lot of religious stuff involved in this overall, especially when it comes to, in America, the evangelicals' support for Israel, which should not be mistaken for support of the Jewish people. And Cenk, I know you've talked about this quite a bit on the show, repeatedly. So talk to me a little bit, talk to the audience a little bit about the religious aspect of this ideology that we're seeing from the far right wing of the Israeli government.
So I'm about to go off on all the fundamentalists, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish in a second. But can you tell people where that saying comes from in the Bible that you mentioned? The Amalek?
Yeah, Amalek. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so my understanding is that Amalek is a reference to how in the Bible your opponents have to be wiped out completely. Men, women, and children. And so that is very relevant here because Netanyahu is basically saying in religious terms that he thinks only the religious fundamentalist followers that he has and that America has will understand. We're gonna kill them all. So that's the kind of monster Netanyahu is. Second of all, whatever your reference is to your religious text as you're about to murder people, I'm not interested. I'm not at all interested. I don't care what you think some mythical creature has whispered into your ear and it is almost always death and destruction. If these religious creatures whispered into your ear, love others, as by the way, Jesus actually said, and Muhammad actually said, well, that would be one thing, right? But to be fair, the Quran and the Bible and the Talmud and the Torah and all of them are filled with both incredibly positive things and incredibly terrible things, including tons and tons of death to your opponents and kill them all. And if you read the Old Testament, it is, as even Sam Harris has acknowledged on this show, the worst of them all. It is filled with bloody violence, God massacring Israel's opponents, nonstop murdering everyone in his path. So that is what Netanyahu is referring to here. And so now to the fundamentalists overall. Look, these lunatics drive us to war, and the rest of us have to stop babying them. Everybody's so worried about political correctness. Oh, what will the religious zealots think? Well, they're telling us they want to kill us all, and we're worried about offending them? I don't care what the religious zealots think. I got news for you. 98 out of 100 times, it's kill them all. That's what they always say, whether they're Muslim, Jewish, or Christian. So the Christian evangelicals here, and by the way, I explained this on Turkish TV this morning, okay? Do not blame Jewish Americans. They got nothing to do with it, okay? It's Christian evangelicals in this country who have this absurd bloodlust for death and destruction in the Middle East. Because some lunatic leader of theirs, not Jesus Christ, not God, it's not in the Bible, it's some end times revelation horse crap that a lunatic American made up here and convinced evangelical Christians. Oh, Israel has to be formed. Israel has to take over the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Israel has to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque. And then there's a giant war. And good news, all the Jews and Muslims die. Yes, said that bloodthirsty monster, and convinced 25% of this country that Armageddon should start in Israel, and it should be put on the heads of all of those Muslims and Jews in that area. Isn't that convenient for Christian fundamentalists here in America, sitting comfortably on their couch, rooting on Armageddon for all of us to die? And by the way, I got news for you. Number one, it's not even in the Bible. They totally fooled you into becoming monsters and savages. And second of all, no, your mythical creature is not going to return to murder us all. And if he does, by the way, I'm not sure he's the good guy. I mean, what kind of monsters sit there and go, I can't wait for almost everyone on earth to die, because then my God comes back and I'm right. And I look at all of you and go, ha ha, you're all dead. And my God murdered you all. And it's not just Christians. Of course, the Muslim fundamentalists say the same goddamn thing. And they're gonna kill everyone that isn't them. And now the Jewish fundamentalists, the settlers, oh, my Yahweh says that all the Akala or Makala or whatever the frick you have in your stupid thing from thousands of years ago. Oh yeah, he says I should kill all of your children, okay? Can you please find a God that doesn't want to kill us all? This is not for all religious people. It is not for most religious people. But for the religious fundamentalists, including George W. Bush, who when he invaded Iraq said to the French leader, it's because Gog and Magog are coming from that area, and that's why we have to kill it. What? And the French leader was like, what the hell's a Gog and Magog? It's some absurd reference to inside the Bible. Unfortunately, the Bible and the other religious texts have murder all over them. But good people, most religious people, do not focus on that. They focus on helping the needy, helping the poor, and spreading love like Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, like Muhammad said over and over again. But no, the fundamentalists say, I don't want the good parts of religion. I want only the negative, evil, destructive, and death that are in these religious texts. Never listen to religious fundamentalists. They are our enemies. They are the enemies of good people, rational people, loving people. But people like George W. Bush and Netanyahu and Hamas leaders are all religious nut jobs, total and utter lunatics who enjoy this death and destruction, and they must be rejected wholesale.
I want to share something that I read about today in regard to what that death and destruction looks like for the civilians on the ground in the Gaza Strip. Pregnant mothers are dying as a result of these airstrikes. And if they're far along in their pregnancy, they cut open their, sorry, it's hard, it's like hard to talk about it.
Yeah, look,
they cut open their stomachs to try to save the fetuses. And anyway, it's just,
yeah.
Anyone who thinks what's happening right now in the Gaza Strip is justified really needs a moment of self-reflection.
And by the way, if you're a Christian evangelical that's celebrating this because you think it's going to bring about end times, or you get to murder all of us, or your deity murders all of us, or whatever sick fantasy that you have, and you claim you're pro-life, the babies are going to die that are in the incubators because they run out of fuel and power. They're all going to die. There's pregnant ladies, 66 a day, and their lives are in danger. So are you pro-life? Are you pro-life, evangelical Christians? I don't believe you at all. If you're a right-winger and you've been supporting end times and you've been supporting Israel so that all the Jews and Muslims can die, you are not at all pro-life. Sorry if I've offended your precious feelings, but the lives of all of these human beings are 1,000 times more important than your feelings. And don't ever tell me you're pro-life, because you don't care about those babies. You don't care about life at all. All you care about is, one day my God's gonna kill you all. Sick, totally and utterly sick.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we have John Fetterman, who has been a massive disappointment on this issue, refuses to call for a ceasefire, does not support a ceasefire. So he got confronted by someone, and the way they treated the man who confronted him is insane. So we've got that story, and Hillary Clinton, where her thoughts are on a ceasefire when we come back.
All right, back on TYT. Cenk and Anna with you guys. I'm just gonna read one member comment. Melissa Rose wrote in, Anna, I watched you on Patrick Bet-David and loved the example you gave about human shields. Yes, nothing like the truth, but into real life consequence. Thank you to all of our members writing in. By the way, whether you are, whatever side you're on, and whether you support us or you're giving us critique, there's nothing wrong with critique. And this is it's a super emotional topic, but it's okay. You can write in with critique as well. We're trying to do the best we can. And here's what we're not going to tolerate. We're not going to tolerate hate against any religion here, okay? Whether it's Muslims or Jews, we will not tolerate any of that, okay? So we're being honest about foreign governments, whether they're Israel or they're Turkey, or by the way, even our own government here in America. And we do criticism, and we're gonna keep doing criticism of unjust actions by governments. But this is not about ethnicities and nationalities and religions. I tell you what the correct problem is, fundamentalists within all of those religions. But it is not the religion itself, and it is not all of the people in that religion. I will not tolerate hate against anyone. All right, Anna.
All right, well, John Fetterman has become a massive disappointment on the issue of Israel's response to Hamas. So let's get into it.
I'm just asking you. You're a good guy. I voted for you. I know you're a nice guy. This is important.
You need to leave.
Here, can I give you a phone?
So I asked him a question.
He just assaulted him.
Professor and lawyer Dan Kovalik was kicked out of an event featuring Senator John Fetterman after asking him about his unwavering support for Israel, despite the ongoing war in the Gaza Strip, which has overwhelmingly killed Palestinian civilians as opposed to Hamas militants. Now, we've been clear about how we feel toward Hamas. We have been clear in how disgusted we were by that terrorist attack. I do believe that Israel has the right to defend itself. I do not believe Israel has the right to engage in the ethnic cleansing that they're currently engaging in. And it turns out Dan Kovalik agrees with me on that and wanted to ask John Fetterman about it. Now, prior to the moment that you just watched, Kovalik told Fetterman the following. In the video, Kovalik, who taught at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law until his contract expired in June, asked the Democrat why he doesn't support a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. After an off-camera person appeared to attempt to stop Kovalik from asking such questions, Kovalik said, quote, I can talk to him, meaning Fetterman. I voted for him. I'm sorry, this is a democracy. And then he also said, sort of. Now, he also said 10,000 people in Gaza have been killed, half are children. The Pope is calling for a ceasefire. The UN is calling for it. I'm just asking you, you're a good guy. I voted for you. I know you're a nice guy. Well, not nice enough to actually really hear him out or even answer what Kovalik had to say, because as you saw in the video, he was immediately kicked out of the area, of the room, pretty viciously, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I saw the whole video. He didn't say anything wrong. He just asked him the simplest question in the world. Here, John Fetterman, I'm asking you, are you for a ceasefire or not? It's the most basic question in this conversation. Well, you're not even willing to answer that? What happened? I thought you were a populist. I thought you were a man of the people. What's going on? Well, I'll tell you what's going on. And so this is the part of the story that you won't hear anywhere else. But I know because of progressive politics and what happened in the primaries. So in the primaries, Democratic Majority for Israel and AIPAC targeted every progressive. And they spent $4 million against Nina Turner, for example. And they spent millions of dollars against Andy Levin, who's a very strong supporter of Israel. But he dared to say that he was in favor of a two-state solution, which I thought was the official American position, right? And he comes from a legendary Jewish family in Michigan. And no, Democratic Majority for Israel spent millions against him because he didn't say that he would just do whatever Israel says, right? Levin deserves all the credit in the world. What a hero, what an American hero, okay? But every person in Democratic politics got the memo. If you oppose any Israeli position, doesn't matter if it's left wing or right wing, no nuance here. It doesn't matter how many Palestinians get killed, nothing matters. We will spend millions of dollars against you. And then, by the way, when Ilhan Omar pointed this out, they did a censure of her. How dare you point out that lobbyists have millions of dollars and spend it? Well, that's a fact. Anyone who says it's not a fact is completely ignorant and doesn't understand politics. So there was a moment in Fetterman's campaign for the Senate where people realized, oh, Fetterman's never said anything about Israel. So, and he's supposed to be a progressive and a populist. So it was a moment where political figures like myself who look at this stuff behind the scenes, we were waiting in anticipation. What is he going to do? Is he going to be a tough guy and oppose them, or he's going to say, I will bow to whatever this foreign government wants? And he came out with a statement saying that he would bow.
That's right.
And he said, I will support Israel basically no matter what. And so this is him now bowing his head again. So look, guys, this is why politicians break our hearts. This is why there's so little hope left in the country. Fetterman was supposed to be the one guy who's populist and progressive, but he did a political calculation and now he won't even answer the question. So I don't know what's in his heart. I don't know if he thinks, well, it is really brutal how they're killing the Palestinians. On the other hand, I made a political calculation that I didn't want those lobbyists spending money against me. So, hey, my campaigns and my career are more important than those lives. Or if he thinks, I don't care about Palestinian lives at all. But that ain't a progressive position and it ain't a populist position. So if you're gonna be any standard old politician and just give in to everything lobbyists want, please stop pretending, put on a suit. Enough with your stupid sweater and shorts if you're gonna act like all the other politicians.
100%, couldn't agree more. Now, he did put out a statement following Hamas's attack on Israel and Israel's response on that attack. Here's what he had to say. Innocent Israelis were the victims of a terrorist attack that resulted in the largest loss of Jewish lives since the Holocaust. Now we know that the tragedy at the Gaza hospital was not caused by Israel.
How about the 10,000 other bombs?
Hold on. First of all, that is still not confirmed. So, by the way, when we covered that story, we made clear it is not confirmed, okay? And we will continue saying that until we have an independent party confirming without a shadow of a doubt that it was one side or the other that bombed that hospital. What we do know is Israel, you're correct, has bombed not only other hospitals, but that very hospital a few days prior to the bombing that made headlines. Okay, so the idea that the IDF doesn't bomb hospitals is laughable and a complete and utter lie. So the fact that Fetterman basically made a declarative statement about who was responsible for that hospital bombing and isn't getting any backlash for it is really fascinating to me. Because look, justifiably, the media got a lot of backlash for initially reporting that it was the IDF without confirmation. Why does Fetterman, a United States senator, get to make this declarative statement? It is a lie, it is not confirmed. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah, but much more importantly, it's a distraction. Because at this point, Channel 4 has done a video showing that it might have been IDF, Channel 4 in UK. BBC and others have done interesting videos showing that it probably was not the IDF. I think at this point it is likely that it was not the IDF, but I'm not perfectly sure, right? But guys, everybody's now using that as an excuse, as if Israel didn't do any bombings in Gaza. So what if one out of thousands and thousands and thousands of bombs that they dropped on ambulances, hospitals, schools, residential buildings, one of them wasn't IDF? What difference does that make? So it's important to get the facts right. But when the only statement you put out is, I don't even believe that there was a bombing of the hospital. It makes it sound like you're saying, I don't believe there was any bombings. Would you like us to roll the tape again on Gaza or what is left of Gaza? I mean, it's absurd. Listen, this is the old school stuff that where American media and American politicians would come out and they would just lie to you straight to your face and go, no, Israel's, they don't target civilians at all. Never, never. Every time the thousands and thousands and thousands of Palestinian civilians killed were all collateral damage and human shields and Hamas's fault, and Israel's never at fault for anything, right? Those are the bad old days. That crap isn't gonna fly anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah, and so the idea that, okay, IDF didn't do that hospital, so they didn't do anything? No, 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 we have eyes, we have ears. And we're used to this crap from normal standard politicians. Fetterman, if you're gonna be a standard corrupt politician, put on a goddamn suit so that we know which uniform you have on, okay? Don't pretend to be one of us.
So I agree with the next part of his statement, okay? But after I read the full statement, you'll understand why I disagree with him. So this part I agree with. He says, I grieve for every innocent person and brave Israeli soldier killed since Hamas started this war. If not for the horrific attacks by Hamas terrorists, thousands of innocent Israelis and Palestinians would still be alive today. So what about the innocent Palestinian civilians who have died as a result of the indiscriminate airstrikes? Because I grieve for Israeli civilians, just as any normal person would grieve for the Palestinian civilians. I mean, the moral clarity here should be shared by everyone, but unfortunately it's not. Because some, like Fetterman apparently, like to dehumanize the civilians on one side, while talking about the tragedy of the loss of life of Israeli civilians on the other side. And then he says, now is not the time to talk about a ceasefire. We must support Israel in their efforts to eliminate the Hamas terrorists who slaughtered innocent men, women, and children. Hamas does not want peace. They want to destroy Israel. We can talk about a ceasefire after Hamas is neutralized.
What insanity.
So
this guy's totally useless. Senator Netanyahu, Fetterman called and would like his body back. What is this? There's not one iota of caring about Palestinian lives. Any Republican could have said that. Any corporate Democrat could have said that. I mean, that sounds like almost all of his quotes sound like they're identical to Netanyahu and his far right-wing government in Israel. What part of this is progressive? Fetterman, please, please go away. Jesus Christ, how many times do these politicians have to break our hearts?
Finally, 16 ex-campaign staffers have put out a letter in response to Fetterman's public statements on this war. And here's what they had to say. They're known as the Fetterman Alumni for Peace. Watching the United States military apparatus beat the drum for war, promising the Israeli government unconditional weapons support, a blank check for more destruction that will lead to the killing of more innocent Israelis and Palestinians, including children, has been heart-wrenching. Watching you lead that charge has felt like a gutting betrayal. These are not the values that we believed you to hold, and these are not our values.
Yeah, all of a sudden Fetterman can't find a way to speak. Before, he was going out of his way. No, I'm fine. But all of a sudden, the cat's got his tongue. Okay, so look, here, I'll do a prediction for you guys. The reason we do predictions is so you know what actually motivates things behind the scenes. So, we don't do mainstream media crap and tell you, oh, these just have ideas and ideologies and points of view. No, my prediction is Fetterman turns around on this. Why? Because he's gonna bleed out voters. All the Democrats that are now being warmongers are losing massive support, okay? In America, It's a new day. And you kiss all of your young voters goodbye. Because young voters across the board, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, atheist, it doesn't matter. They're all against this bloody war, okay? So after Fetterman sees his numbers bleed out, he'll care a lot more about that than he does about Palestinian lives. But he'll turn around and then he'll pretend to be a progressive again. You know why? Because these guys, they only care about themselves. So thanks for breaking our heart on the last guy we had hope on. We appreciated John Fetterman for proving that all politicians are just beholden to the donors and the lobbyists and the military industrial complex and the oil companies, etc. Go start another war for them, Fetterman. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. I guarantee you he turns around and it'll be completely disingenuous. Oh, look at my poll numbers. Oh, okay, I meant Palestinians' lives might matter too. Yeah, I noticed you being a warmonger here. Populist progressive, my ass. Go take your acting classes somewhere else, okay? And Professor Kovalik, thank you for being an American hero. That was a great question, and every senator should be asked that. By the way, Bernie Sanders, again, put out a statement acknowledging that Palestinian lives matter, and we appreciate it. Senator Sanders, as usual, he's been the best senator on this. But having said that, he also didn't call for a ceasefire. And he should also be asked, are you in favor of a ceasefire, or are you with the warmongers now, who's gonna drive both Palestinians and Israel into greater and greater danger through endless stupid wars that the defense contractors here in America profit off of? And if you guys aren't going to be progressives, please stop pretending and go to Hollywood or something. Just be the cheesy actors that you want to be.
That does it for our first hour. When we come back, Hillary Clinton weighs in on the notion of Israel engaging in a ceasefire. We've got that, and then we'll move off the topic overall and cover some other news of the day. Don't miss it. We might even have a little bit of fun in the tail end of the show. We'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.